Continuing Perennial Philosophy of Huxley, crude formulations of some of the doctrines of the perennial philosophy are to be found in the thought systems of the uncivilized so-called primitive peoples of the world among the Maoris. For example, every human being is regarded as a compound of four elements: a divine eternal principle known as toiora. Number 1. 2. An ego which disappears at death. 3. A ghost shadow or psyche which survives death. And finally, a body. Among the Oglala Indians, the divine element is called the sican. This is regarded as identical with the tone or divine tone, divine essence of the world. Other elements of the self are the nagi or personality and nira or vital soul. After death, the sican is reunited with the divine ground of all things. The nagi survives in the ghost world of psychic phenomena, and the nira disappears into the material universe. Is that like the soul, the mind, and the body? There?
You know,
The mind.
the mind.
One
could
is the
be
personality.
The mind could be the ego.
There's three things in that one, it seems like. In regard to no 20th century primitive society, can we rule out the possibility of influence or borrowing from some higher culture? Consequently, have no right to argue from the present to the past, because many contemporary savages have an esoteric philosophy that is monotheistic, with a monotheism that is sometimes of the that art thou variety. We are not entitled to infer offhand that Neolithic or Paleolithic men held similar views. More legitimate and more intrinsically plausible are the inferences that may be drawn from what we know about our own physiology and psychology. We know that human minds have proved themselves capable of everything from imbecility in quantum theory, from Mein Kampf and sadism to the sanctity of Philip Neri, from metaphysics to crossword puzzles, power politics and the Missa Solemnis. Is he referring to Beethoven or something else? He does the Missa Solemnis. We also know that human minds are in some way associated with human brains, and we have fairly good reasons for supposing that there have been no considerable changes in the size conformation of human brains for a good many thousands of years. Consequently, it seems justifiable to infer that human minds in the remote past were capable of many and as various kinds of degrees of activities as our minds at the present time. It is, however, certain that many activities undertaken by some minds at the present time were not in the remote past undertaken by any minds at all. For this, there are several obvious reasons. Certain thoughts are practically unthinkable except in terms of an appropriate language and within the framework of an appropriate system of classification where these necessary instruments do not exist. The thoughts in question are not expressed and not even conceived, nor is this all. The incentive to develop the instruments of certain kinds of thinking is not always present. For long periods of history and prehistory, it would seem that men and women, though perfectly capable of doing so, did not wish to pay attention to problems which their descendants found absorbingly interesting. For example, there is no reason to suppose that between the 13th century and the 20th century, the human mind underwent any kind of evolutionary change comparable to the change, let us say, in the physical structure of the horse's foot during an incomparably longer span of a geological time. What happened was that men turned their attention from certain aspects of reality to certain other aspects. The result among other things, was the development of the natural sciences. Our perceptions and our understanding are directed, in large measure, by our will. We are aware of that. We are aware of and we think about the things which, for one reason or another, we want to see and understand. Where there's a will, there's always intellectual way. The capabilities of your mind are almost indefinitely great. Whatever we will to do, whether it be come to the unitive knowledge of the Godhead or to manufacture self-propelled flamethrowers, that we are able to do, provided always that the willing be sufficiently intense and sustained. It is clear that many of the things to which modern men have chosen to pay attention were ignored by their predecessors. Consequently, the very means of thinking clearly and fruitfully about those things remained uninvented, not merely during prehistoric times, but even to the opening of the modern era. The lack of suitable vocabulary and adequate reference, the absence of any strong, sustained desire to invent these necessary instruments of thought here are two sufficient reasons why so many of the almost endless potentialities of the human mind remain for so long unactualized. Another, and on its own level, equally cogent reason is this: much of the world's most original and fruitful thinking is done by people of poor physique and of a thoroughly unpractical turn of mind. Because of this is so, because the value of pure thought, whether analytical or integral, has everywhere been more or less clearly recognized. Provision is made by every civilized society for giving thinkers a measure of protection from the ordinary strains and stresses of social life. I don't know what he said there. The hermitage, the monastery, the college, the academy, the research laboratory, the begging bowl, the endowment, the patronage, the grant of taxpayers' money, such as the principal devices that have been used by activities to conserve that rare bird, the religious, philosophical, artistic, and scientific contemplative. In many primitive societies, conditions are hard and there is no surplus wealth. The born contemplative has to face the struggle for existence and social predominance without protection. I don't know. Does he need it? He can just be a witch doctor in the caveman. The result, in most cases, is that he either dies young or is too desperately busy merely keeping alive to be able to devote his attention to anything else. I suppose that's true. They did die young. When this happens, the prevailing philosophy is that of the hardy, extroverted man of action. So all the early cavemen were extroverts. Man of action with the sword and the spear. All of this sheds some light. Dim it is true, merely inferential, on the problem of the perennialness of the perennial philosophy. In India, the scriptures were regarded not as revelations made at some given moment of history, but as eternal gospels, existent from everlasting to everlasting, and as much as co-evolve with man, or that, for that matter, with any other kind of corporeal, incorporeal being possessed of reason. A similar point of view is expressed by Aristotle, who regards